modeling of the crystalline lens oscillations triggered by gaze.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, my name is Jorge Grasa. I'm from the University of Zaragoza in Spain. And today I'm going to talk to you about an ongoing work that we are developing in collaboration with the people of the Wrocław University of Science and Technology in Poland. So let me, is this working? Okay, yeah. Let me introduce just first a little bit to the problem that we are trying to model in this case using a biomechanical approximation. And yeah, we try to analyze the inertial movement of the lens when it's subjected to, as we said here, to rapid gaze stiffness or movements. And actually, this phenomena has been studied by means of the well-known Parkinson images that you can see or you can observe here. Okay, you can see here in this video that the reflection of some points of light are altered during the inertial motion of the lens. So our idea is to develop a 3D computational model able to simulate this phenomena in order to have a better understanding of what's happening or what affect really the movement of the lens inside the eye. So just as a little anecdote, you can see here that I asked ChatGPT about how is the shape inside the eye of the ciliary body and also the sonular fibers in order to see if the artificial intelligence is able to provide me a real reconstruction of the inside of the eye. You can see that there are some mistakes that actually, at least last month, the artificial intelligence was not able to reproduce. So let's move to the basic idea of how to develop a experimental setup just in order to measure this inertial movement. I have to say that all about some experiments and all about this experimental setup will be presented this afternoon by my colleague Agnieszka in the poster session, and she will be happy to answer all your questions about this amazing experimental setup. Basically, it's made by a light source providing a semi-arc of points, and these points, light points, are reflected in the different optical surfaces. Here are the definition of the different points that are analyzed, and we are focusing on the relative position of two of these different points that are the P4 and P1 position in the anterior part of the cornea and in the posterior part of the lens. So since we are looking at the reflections of these points, we need to translate, or we need to be able to compare what we are obtaining from the biomechanical simulation to what we are observing in the experimental setup. So my colleague performed a very nice optical simulation, and she obtained an expression that is written here down in the slide. That is the relation between the distance of what we are observing in the actual images in the experimental setup and the relative position of the lens compared with the axial axes that are represented here when the eye is actually rotating. So we call them the tilt and the decentration. That is the movement relative to the optical axis. Sorry. So let's move to the computational model we developed. And I have to say that As I said, this is an ongoing process, and we perform several approaches. So the very first approach that we conduct was, okay, we have a dynamical system. Let's see what are the principal eigenmodes that the lens oscillate suspended by the sonular fiber. So this is the first model that I show here in the left-hand side. That is basically a realistic representation of the lens in the accommodated position. And in this kind of light blue color, you see the approximate region where the lens is suspended by the sonular fibers. So with this model, what we analyze, given an elastic property of these fibers, we analyze that eigenfrequency modes that are suitable and that the lens behaves when oscillating. So this was our first approach, just to have an idea of the principal modes of this system. But actually, this model is not able to provide us what is happening if there are some different structures considered in the dynamic simulation, and also is not able to provide what is the effect of the intraocular pressure in the anterior posterior chamber and also in the vitreous chamber. So the idea was to construct in another step of this approach in the modeling process, is to consider just the interaction between the different parts of the eye globe. So this is what is called in the simulation, this type of models are the fluid structure interaction models, or the fluid structure interaction process where the structural or the hard materials interact with the fluid ones. So in that case, we can observe effects like the damping effect of the oscillation process that otherwise our first model is not able to predict. So there is rotating a 3D representation of our model with 2 planes where we are able to observe the kind of approach that we develop in the computational model. You can observe that we have not considered, let's say, the ciliary body, because from a previous work, we demonstrate that during the accommodative state of the eye, that contracted muscle is rigid enough to be not considered at least at this very beginning of the modeling process. So yeah, in this fluid structure interaction model, the process or the way to obtain the configuration in order to start rotating the eye is or was performed in 2 steps. The first step is the one where we apply the intraocular pressure. So you can see here in red the fluid part of the model. So those fluids, as you know, are subjected to a initial pressure. So we have to introduce that pressure in our simulation. And it was done in this first step. After this initial step, we conducted the rotation of the eye and let the model start to oscillate in the way that we intended to be the more closest to the real behavior as possible. So the way that we rotate the eye is based on a previous work, and you can see here different curves of the angular velocity that are possible to obtain in the real eye. These velocities, as just to always take into account the experimental results that we are trying to fit, these velocities corresponds to the actual velocity that the lights are rotated in order to the subject be following them. So this corresponds to the 10 degrees per second. That is basically this dot curve that we observe there. In the table in the left-hand side, there are some mechanical properties that we use in our model. As you can see, in this approach, we consider the surrounding tissues that at this very beginning we think that are not important in the behavior that we are intended to represent. So the sclera and cornea are represented as rigid solid bodies. Then you can see the mechanical properties of the lens, a homogeneous material given by those parameters considered as linear elastic, Young modulus, Poisson's coefficient. Sorry. And finally, the hyperelastic material properties for the sonular structure. So let me show you some results, starting from the frequency analysis of the isolated lens. You can see here the first 6 principal modes of oscillation of the lens, mode 1 to mode 6, and the associated eigenfrequency values. You can observe that more or less they are at the same magnitude order, of course, but are pretty close signs. They are like the rigid solid body motions along the different axes, and the 3 final ones are basically the rotations along those axes. So this gives us the idea that what we observe in the experiments should be, if we not consider other interactions, should be around those frequency values. So let's move to the more detailed model results, and let's speak about them in just beginning with the left-hand side upper diagram that you observe here. It's a map color of the absolute or the modulus of the displacement of the points of the structural part of the model. I have to say that to make those animations more, let's say, more visual, I have changed artificially the properties of the sonules in order to be more, or to represent a largest magnitude than the actual or what we observe in the experimental results. So you can see that when the eye stops rotating, the lens starts this oscillation, and the points that are representing those physical places where the light reflects are moving according to the decentration and also the tilt of the lens. So these are results that refer to the structural part of the model. In the right-hand side, you can observe the fluid part. In this case, we are looking at the vector field that represents the velocity of the points of the fluid inside the anterior posterior chamber and the vitreous one. So as the eye rotates, it kind of since the lens is suspended, the lens is pulling or pushing the fluid in those chambers, and you observe here, like in the red colors, the maximum values of the velocity of the fluids. And just to represent the idea of the 3-dimensionality of the model, here in the lower part, you have a 3D representation of the oscillating mode in the planes that are cut. That if you look at the axis, red, blue, white, red, blue, green, you can see that these views are actually looking at the 3D model just at the bottom. So yeah, our models seems to work. So let's take or let's conduct some sensitivity analysis to fully understand what is the dependence of the different properties or different geometries even on the, let's say, the relative position of the lens and the anterior part of the cornea. That is what I mentioned previously, the difference between P4 and P1, those reflected points of the images. So here, the very first sensitivity analysis is conducted to analyze what is the effect on the stiffness, what is the effect of the stiffness of the singular structure on the displacement or the relative position of those points. So you can observe that the higher the stiffness, the higher the frequencies we achieve. So if you remember the values of the eigenfrequency analysis in the first model, we are around 23 here for 50 kilopascals stiffness of this region. So basically you observe here that the higher the stiffness, the higher the frequency of oscillation of the lens. So another sensitivity analysis that we can conduct is relative of the geometry of the zonular region. So here you can observe that the volume of that suspensory ligaments are increasing from geometry 1 to geometry 3, and accordingly, the frequency, the oscillating frequency increase to that increasing amount of volume that represents the geometry 3. So these are results that are pretty logical and that the model is able to provide us in order to see what is happening when we rotate it. And finally, I want to explain you basically what is happening here or what we consider here, because in the previous results, you observe that there is no damping effect in the response signal. If we do not consider like additional damping for the structural materials, the decay of the signal will be very low. And this is not what happened in the real results or in the real experiments. So we have to introduce some damping to the materials. The materials are not always ideal. They have some kind of damping effect. And just not to explain it a lot, there are in the model that we consider, that is the Rayleigh model, there are two basic parameters, alpha and beta, that the first one scales the mass of the system, and the second one, beta, scale the stiffness of the material, considering this case. So you can observe here the effect of increasing alphas, that the decay of the signal also increase. So the more damped signal corresponds to the largest alpha. And also same effect is obtained varying the beta parameter. And finally, I want to show you here in red color in this curve, is there a signal that was obtained in the experimental test. And the experimental test corresponds to different situations, different subjects. Those situations refers to different intraocular pressure measured and different, of course, different geometries. So we try to fit our model results to that experimental result. So you can see here that maybe it's not the best approach, but it's an initial one, and we will try to improve that, taking into account some limitation that I will explain later in the discussion slide. So you can observe that the model is able to capture the overshooting effect, and also that is able to start, let's say, capturing the decay effect due to the friction between the fluids and also the damping inherent in the material of the structure. So we think that we are in the good way. And yeah, finally, to conclude, quite discrepancies between the simulation and the observer oscillation that may be due to this initial approach that are basically simplification of the model. I forgot to say that we are considering the dilated eye, because in that case, the friction between the iris and the lens will be neglected. But yeah, there is not, let's say, always there is kind of a friction between those tissues, although there is a higher dilatation. So basically this methodology, as I said in the last conclusion, provides a starting foundation just to advance in the understanding of what is happening inside the eye, that actually it's only approached by those representation or optical analysis due to this type of images that we have discussed. So basically, this is our work. If you want, although I'm not very active in these networks, if you wanted to know more about our ongoing work and previous works, you have here the links to LinkedIn and research. So thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer your question.
Thank you so much. This was just so interesting for me. And so I just have a question. So I'm just curious. So can we then use these models to maybe try to understand some lens dynamics behind things like your presbyopia, your age-related lens changes?
Yeah, I have to say that, of course, it's possible. Actually, we have worked in some models in this direction. But I have to say that when you look at the biomechanics and you also want to look at in this case, the optics, you have to be very, very accurate with your, let's say, 3D representation of your structures there, in order to be sure that the optical, let's say, effect is perfectly approached with your representation of the geometry. Because we do not work here. I mean, we are solving a set of equations that are those of the mass balance, momentum balance, etc., that we are obtaining in certain points of the geometry. That is the finite element mesh, what we call the finite element mesh. So at the moment we develop that mesh, we are performing an approach. And this approach could be negative in the sense of the representation in order to conduct optical simulation. But yeah, it's possible with some good approaches, you could be able to do that.
Thank you. It was very interesting, your talk. Can you give me some idea of the tear layer? If you're measuring P1, how robust is the P1 to the dynamic changes in the tear layer? Was it completely independent of those changes?
Yeah, I have to say, I have to excuse myself. I didn't actually conduct the experimental results, so I'm not totally able to answer your question in terms of the accuracy of the experimental setup. So I just translate your answer for later discuss in the poster session, maybe. It will be more precise answer. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much for this nice talk. I have some questions about the modeling itself. So I saw in the vector field that there seems to be a crossover between the anterior chamber and the vitreous, while in reality they're separate. Did you consider that?
They are separate. Maybe in the representation because the vector field is somehow scaled or normalized in order to better see the actual field of velocity.
Mhm.
So maybe that's what you're referring to, that there are vectors that get inside the
that
another
cross.
chamber and so on. But this is a representation problem. Because if I took the proper length of the vector,
Mhm.
you only will see points in certain regions. So there will be a field that is not, let's say, understandable to see the effect of the velocity. So maybe it's that. Actually, the chambers are totally separated by the ring that represents the sonules.
Yeah. Did you also consider the Uyghur ligaments at the posterior surface of the lens?
No.
Not yet.
No.
That might help also a bit with the overshooting that seemed to be a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Because it seems to dampen the thing in OSNAS simulations last time.
Yeah. Yeah. This is actually what we saw in a presentation yesterday. I don't remember the name of the presenter there, but in the video that she saw us, there is the effect of the posterior sonule there.
It was Lisa.
Yeah, the idea is the sonular region is a very complicated, let's say, material to simulate, but our approach, it's a ring-like region that will allow us the possibility to consider some permeability between the chambers in order to consider that in the model. It's something that we are working on in order to have a more realistic representation and consider the fluid moving between those chambers. That will be possible thanks to that ring body or ring solid considered there.
Yeah, some kind of permeable membrane you got there.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Got any questions?
Maybe I will answer now.
Thank you.
I'm coming back to the previous question about the resolution. Yeah, our setup have a pixel size about 20 micrometers, but we have sub-pixel resolution because of the machine vision which we use with tracking the Purkinje images. So it will be even about 2 micrometers. So I think that's quite nice. And also we will have the poster when we will see this curves which we can obtain, how it looks.
Thank you for your presentation. It's only a quick, curious question. Did you assume homogeneous tension around the crystalline lens because of the ciliary muscle?
Actually, the idea is that we are at the accommodated state of the lens. So in that state, the ring is stress-free because of the release of tension in the sonular region. So that is the main, let's say, first approach that we consider.
I can think of a number of interesting variations on the theme here, and I'm just wondering, I'm curious to know if you are planning to look at for the influence, for example, of head posture, looking up, looking forward, looking down, and maybe the effect of accommodation. The lens changes its shape, it can influence the dynamics, and for some of us, we can't accommodate. So the presbyopic individual will be of interest as well. I'm wondering if you're if your research program will be investigating any of those kinds of topics.
Thank you for your question. The idea, we have developed previous model in 2D. So right now with this 3D model, we are able to start analyzing some different effects like the ones you said. And yeah, this is something that I take note because these are very important, let's say, initial conditions or boundary conditions to take into account to the model. Once the model is validated, or once the model is for sure giving us proper results, then we are able to vary the boundary conditions, the initial conditions. We are able to start playing with the model in order to better know some different effects. And yeah, of course, this could be one of them. Yeah. Thank you for your comment.
Yes, we can hear you. How are you doing?
From each one of you. I would like to thank the organizers for making this possible for us to attend via this video call way of the day, and also the live streaming on YouTube, so it's very helpful at the time to watch most of the meetings so far. So if we are ready, I can start.
Yes, you ready?
Okay. So today I will be talking about our advanced in-vitro methodologies for the comprehensive optical and intraocular lenses. And it's not only the lenses that we have, the total. I wanted to make a summary of what this is going to be about. So if you see the natural lens, we have a pretty image quality across the visual field. We have curvature following more or less the curvature of the retina. We have some particular mapping between the outside world and the retinal location. These are not exactly like that in the stereotypic eye. First of all, we know that we have extensive and very thin aberrations in the periphery, and then astigmatism, the focus being the big one, but also aberrations that severely deteriorate the image quality of axis. And also we have noticed theoretically, but also experimentally, that the location at which peripheral fields are in the retina can be affected by the exchange of the natural crystals with an and we have studies showing how much this is happening and what the impact might be in the living eye, I mean, after cataract. Also, there are other phenomena such as dysphotopsia. We have light missing the edge of the eye and going around the optic, and basically we have this kind of phenomenon where you focus light with the lens and you have light and shadow again, and this is what is happening in the peripheral field. I will show you some how we record it in model eye. shadow is called negative orthodoxy because it resembles light emitting from where it could be. So we have other phenomena in the lenses which are like the glistening or which cause puckering in the eye, getting into the eye, or we have surface or suboptimal surface created by the machining or the molding process on the surface of the lens. And these are the defects beyond what you can measure with power or with weight controls on the lens. These are things that need to be studied on the straight domain, right? Statistical verify range and sensitivity. We also have multifocal models, which is I will want to with some level of skepticism, how much multifocality is good and what we could good or bad or too much or too little multifocality that causes this kind of contrast during the day without completely missing the edges of the phenomena of the image, and getting, of course, much worse during the night with those again, I'm going to show you how we do this kind of simulation and how we quantify what is function in those lenses. So this is the purpose of this talk, to understand the eye, understand optics and distortion, understand photopsia and daylight, and also quantify all that using a new method in order to understand symptoms, improve high-level designs or for high-level design improvements, and also in some cases improve high-level manufacturing, such as improve the methodology method, improve the machining method and precision at which the design shape, right, to the and so on. In Diestia, in nothing, this is part of our core activities to help companies improve their lens. Here's an example of how peripheral refraction looks in the human eye after cataract surgery. In the pseudophyte, you see here is this characteristic myopia in the periphery. That this is visual angle, and this is the amount of defocus or spherical equivalent. A good part of this is astigmatism, reflected spherical equivalent here, and this defocus of an astigmatism and other aberrations do have an effect on our detection sensitivity in the periphery. This is done at 40 degrees visual field, and vertical and horizontal had a similar effect. Field, I mean, right? Display in for vertical horizontal field had similar effect. And R25 meniscus eye that we have been working on for quite some time, and we know that it reduces those periphery because it's designed with the location of its principal plane, bringing the match between the principal curvature of this part here segment and the rest. And we thought having improvement in the peripheral visual field actually corresponds to some improvement in the detection threshold for peripheral small objects. So it has an impact in vision, and it's not vertical. Another thing that we noticed is that when you have, and what I mentioned in the beginning, you have and then you have not a simple magnification. It's not going to go a couple of slides. Here, for example, you can, it's not only a magnification, but if you are in the periphery, then a small magnification in the center associated with half a millimeter of movement of the nodal point. In the half a millimeter of movement, if you're talking about objects in the far periphery, right? Because of the shape of the rest. So this is what we observe here. We developed a method where on the image before and after surgery and allow some features of around uncommon find the appropriate algorithm. And we know, again, this distortion can be on the order of 1 degree for objects up to 40 degrees, let's say. It can be more according to the theory for the far periphery, but it's difficult to assess photography. But after this, is that this is not a magnification, this is a nonlinear behavior, and the let's say, of retinal locations to visual fields can be up to 2 or 3 degrees for the far periphery. And again, in this case, we observe that the lens is getting deeper, closer to the principal plane of the crystalline, produce less this effect. We developed the physical model of the eye. This has been around for quite some time. It has been seen several improvements, mainly in the optics of the cornea, the algorithms that we use to analyze images in the sample themselves, and in the methods that we employ, of course. And practically, it's a cornea. It has a diaphragm that holds the pupil, right? It has a 9 holder, and all this is immersed in water. We have an underwater camera where the retina is, and which rotate in different angles and take images in the periphery of the field. Initially, we use this to make this kind of simulations, for example, using those lens that have this peripheral skirt to reduce overall thickness and this kind of behavior for small pupil sizes. But when the pupil gets big and you have peripheral part being exposed to light, you get this bringing of light associated with this cone-like shape in the near the eye. And you can imagine that it's even worse or even less predictable when the light source is off axis, right? It's approaching this lens at an angle. However, in order to get a quantitative result, we improved our methodologies. We included internal cameras to view the lens and ensure that it is properly aligned with the pupil or control the concentration in some cases. The spectrum of the light sources produce standard tests with different sources, direct sunlight and diffuse light from extended surfaces, and different visual tasks. We have acuity, contrast, sensitivity, type tests with ratings, fields, dot, gratings, all different types, depending on what one wants to see. And this led to a number of publications with studying the glare of the high rise. For example, in this case, we have measured lenses and compared the mounted focus with the standard lenses, and you can see how much more you have in this size, or in this case, when we compare the around the core, let's say, of the PSA or in different lengths. What we're improving in this field is that by using one in a configuration and with appropriate camera calibration methods, with proper understanding of the noise, that of the images that we can obtain through focus data that the point spread with 6 or maybe a bit more sometimes orders of magnitude. We can measure this in a through focus configuration. Of course, from this kind of data, you can do the F, of course, through focus, which you can compare. And in this example, you can see this is a very difference between a monofocal and multifocal lens. This is a trifocal, by the way, and you can see both the increase of the skirt in the halo around the central field. The part around half a degree is what you usually see in those right, common in the field, but in this experiment measure for the of the PSF, and this it can be happening through focus. So this is the more of the that we are taking now. The high function different lenses. Also about glistenings, this have a very minor effect on stray light. They can look dramatic like this, but the distribution is not very high. So in order to measure this precisely, we are employing this optical method, whole trick where you project discs, so we're increasing the angle, we record the intensity in the center, and we get this kind of the data like I'm showing here, and appropriate calculation to derive the function. This is a very simple technique because basically you are integrating straight different and you can measure about 408 orders of magnitude, again provided that you take proper care of the noise and your camera configuration. Finally, about another phenomenon, the report where light is emitted dark because of light well and is directly reaching also the light to the high well, and what we have measured is that cause the part to go through the lens, which is this part that I'm showing here, to be accommodized as you go towards the periphery. This is a different field angle, right? While the part goes around the edge of the eye well persists and intensifies, and then this spatially variant nature of the PSF, the edge of the visual field, leads into a dark because you have dual PSF, and then you go towards the periphery. At some point, the second part, I mean the part through the vanish, and you get in the density and the overall light. This is a light of a uniform field, right? We put a screen, a computer screen at an reason we record this distribution here on the left. And again, in this case, you can close by using the very short under diagonal in your lens. Of course, this phenomenon disappears, but also it disappears with this meniscus lenses because it's inherently shorter, smaller, I mean, less light goes around it. And this is another benefit of having a lens with a more natural optical shape for central vision. We have this test, which is for on-active analysis. This is the same model eye, but we can use different optical lenses and in the water, and we have a telescope conjugating a tunable lens and then we go through focus and we capture images of this standardized. And for water, we have quality. Of course, infinity all the way to their performance, more or less. You have one focal length, which is this one, being the highest image quality, nearly a perfect letter. You have lenses, some loss of darkness to red. This one, like the blue one, which is a diffractive EDOF lens with an additional focus here around like 1.5 diopter. So you can see all this here that whatever you gain for near, you lose from far, right? And this is normal. If you take half of the light or a quarter of the light and focus it on a near focus, then this light is going to be out of focus when you are dealing with infinity, and this will reduce the contrast of your image at infinity. So this kind of analysis or plotting your data like that shows how near is your near point above the threshold, right? That you can still see something. And what is the overall image quality as an integral under the, or as a mean value, which is a similar thing, under this curve can give you this kind of appearance. And this is a showing, this is a plot showing the different lenses, how good they have mean image quality between, let's say, infinity and 2 diopters, so 50 centimeters versus how near you can see. So, and you can see that lenses like the EDOF that are for that, because this is what this metric is looking at. And lenses that very low performance overall because they quickly go to zero, but they keep with image quality, right? Depending on what you want to evaluate, far image quality, range of vision, overall image quality from infinity to near or from infinity to half a meter or whatever is important for every case, you can rank your lenses in an arrangement like that and definitely decide and compare with clinical data and understand which lens is the best for each particular patient. So in summary, we've been working on different tests beyond current ISO standards that mostly refer to on-axis measurements. These tests have to both central resolution and peripheral disturbances, such as photopsia or glare phenomena. The purpose is to provide comprehensive view of the functional image quality in clinical certified to support optimization of manufacturing processes, understand the patient-reported issues such as the photopsias and the glare or the disturbances between the four corners of vision because of, for example, disturbance related to the focal or diffractive lenses that they see halos or loss of image quality. And this is to these methods that could bridge the in lab testing and real world out. There are methods also that saying that this one is very easy to link to activity. Unfortunately, this is not published yet, and we think that this kind of approach, like the one that I was talking about earlier, with the lenses per application, may help us guide more personalized eyewear selection in advanced. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Harris. Is there any question for us?
Hi, Harilaos. This is Bruce. Yeah, very interesting talk. Congratulations to develop such a comprehensive system. My question is, have you ever tried to relate your the results from your system? I would call it objective parameter to the subjective response from the patients.
Question. This is what we are currently working on. We are looking into variations from we are working with the hospital, we are not a clinic, and we are gathering this type of information and we hope to get at some point
Okay.
what we have to do.
Okay. Okay. Looking forward to your next presentation. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, then we move on to the next speaker, which is Charlie Börjeson, who is a former student of Linda Lundström, and they will give a presentation on peripheral refraction with and without accommodation. Okay, Charlie, it's all yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you so much for inviting me to give this presentation. I will see if I can share my screen. Does this work?
Yes.
Yes, great. Yes, so I'm from KTH in Stockholm, and we have been doing a study on peripheral refraction with and without accommodation. So myopia is an increasing problem worldwide, and some factors that have been identified as related to this to myopia is near work and peripheral image quality. And the latter, peripheral image quality, is now extensively used for myopia control. When we talk about peripheral image quality, often it's a good concept to use is relative peripheral refraction. So relative peripheral refraction is how, oh wait, I should change my pointer so that you can see better. Do you see this now? Yeah. Relative peripheral refraction is a measure of how the refraction in the periphery is relative to the fovea. So when we talk about negative RPR, relative peripheral refraction, that means that the periphery is relatively myopic compared to fovea. And oppositely positive RPR is when the periphery is relatively hypermetropic. For animal studies, negative RPR has been shown to stimulate the stop growth, whereas hypermetropic RPR would then allow the eye to grow more quickly. In this study, we wanted to see how RPR is affected during new work. So we looked at how accommodation affects RPR in different refractive groups and ages. So for this study, we wanted to include both adults and children. And for the adults, we recruited both image and myopes. For the children, they could be both ametropic or myopic or hyperopic. We did RPR measurements in the 25-degree nasal and temporal visual fields for 2 levels of accommodation. And we did this measurements with a dual angle visual sensor that allows for simultaneous foveal and peripheral measurements. So in total, we recruited 10 adult emetropes and 9 adult myopes. And then we also recruited 31 children. So the ages of the adults was around 25 years old and the children were around 8 years old. When we did the measurements for RPR, we wanted the subjects to wear their habitual correction because we wanted to see what RPR is in their everyday life. So for the emetropes, that meant that they did not wear the correction. The adult myopes were a bit mixed, some more spectacles, some more contact lenses. And for the children, there were only 2 subjects that had any habitual correction and those were spectacles. We measured RPR using our dual angle waveform sensor. This sensor consists of 2 channels. So we measure on one eye, the right eye, and we either then measure foveal and temporal visual field or nasal and foveal visual field. So one of the sensors will take care of the foveal field and the other of either temporal or nasal visual field. So the subjects, they sit and they look at the hot mirror, so they use normal binocular fixation. And then they either look at far targets, so that was 4.5 meters away, or a near target, so 20 centimeters away. And this then means that there's almost a 5 diopter difference in terms of accommodation stimulus between these targets. And refraction in the to get RPR, we of course need to define refraction both foveally and peripherally. And in the periphery, it can be a bit tricky to define refraction accurately. And this is because all of the aberrations in the periphery affect the focus and the depth of focus. So we saw that in our measurements, the depth of focus in the periphery in 25 degrees was almost 2 diopters, or sometimes more. But we still, even though there's a lot of focus, we need to get a single value for the peripheral refraction, and we chose to use second order spherical refraction to define refraction, both foveally and in the periphery. And we choose the second order because this minimizes the totally square Börjeson error over the whole pupil, and because it's less sensitive to small fluctuations in higher order aberrations. When we have second order spherical refraction, we get pupil dependence. So you will get different results whether you use the natural pupil or if you have a smaller pupil. So for this reason, we did the analysis for natural pupils and for 3 millimeter diameter pupils. So from now we have this, we have the foveal measurements, the peripheral measurements, and remember that these are simultaneous. So we have for each time step, we have both the foveal and the peripheral matching pair of the waveform data. And this means that if there's any fluctuations in accommodation, whether there's lead or lag, we always know what the accommodative state in the fovea is. So we can account for that. We know both the peripheral and the foveal refraction at all times. So that means that our calculation of LPR becomes accurate since we don't rely on assumptions that accommodation is stable, for instance. So, what are the results? In this graph, I've plotted the adult data from the adult In-Vitros. On the x-axis, we have relative peripheral refraction in the nasal visual field, and on the y-axis, we have in the temporal visual field. This dashed line in the middle is the symmetry line, and this means that the subject had the same relative peripheral refraction in both the nasal and temporal visual field. The dot would end up on this line. So each dot here is the subject, and we can see then that all subjects have negative nasal RPR, whereas the temporal RPR is more spread out from 0. And this also means that we have an asymmetry. We can see that most subjects are on one side of the symmetry line. So there's an asymmetry in the RPR profile. If we look at the myos, we can immediately see that most myos have more nasal RPR and more positive nasal RPR than the others. Whereas temporal RPR is still reduction on 0. And this then means, as we can see, that they are all more spread out evenly around the symmetry line. So there's not an asymmetric profile in the myos. And then for the children, we can see that we have, first of all, we have much more children, but they are also more concentrated in the middle here. So their RPR, both nasally and temporally, is closer to 0 than for the adults. Still, most of the children have a slightly more negative nasal RPR than temporally. And this means that they have this asymmetric tendency, similar to what the adult In-Vitros have. They're all on one side of the symmetry line, or most of them are. Now, this graph is for 3 millimeter scope pupils and just for the far measurements, when they looked at the far targets, so 4.5 meters away. If we now want to see what happens when they accommodate, we get this. So the yellow dots are the near measurements, and each subject is then the dots farthest far, and the near measurements are connected with a line. And if we start looking at the emmetropes, we see clearly that nasal RPR has become more negative for all subjects. And temporal RPR has become maybe a slightly bit more positive. And this negative shift nasally and positive shift temporally means that the asymmetry has increased for emmetropes. And we see now that all dots, all yellow dots are on the same side of the symmetry line. For myopes, we also have negative nasal shift, not really any temporal shifts. We see that there's still sort of even this predominant symmetry line, no shared symmetry. And children are quite similar to the emmetropes in that there's a distinct negative nasal shift with accommodation, not really any clear tendencies. Then this group of 3 millimeter pupils, we can look at what the graphs look like for natural pupils as well. The top row here is the one I showed you, and the bottom row is for natural pupils. And I think the most clear difference between these two sets of graphs is that the nasal shift is not as clear in the natural pupils. We don't have the same horizontal movement from the blue to yellow dots in the graph. This may be a little bit more positive trend in the temporal RPR for natural pupils. And if we compare individual dots, of course, we can't see exactly which dot corresponds to which between these two rows. But some dots are a little bit more the same between 3 millimeter case and natural pupil case, and some move around a bit more. And that is to be expected because for natural pupils, of course, some people have very large pupils and others have very small pupils. So the difference would be expected to be different size. If we look at some numbers for the asymmetry, I've here created a table. So we have the median differences between the nasal and temporal RPR for emmetropes, myopes, and children. And for both 3 millimeter size and natural pupil size, and far and near targets. And we see that for the adult emmetropes, the nasal RPR is always more negative than the temporal RPR, or average for all of these cases. Usually a bit more than 1 diopter difference between the nasal and temporal fields. For myopes, it's a little bit more in the positive direction, but the significance for this, it was not significant. So we can't say that there's any asymmetry between the nasal and temporal visual fields. The children are similar to the adult emmetropes in that we see that there's significant asymmetry with the nasal being more negative, but the values here, as you can see, are much lower in terms of absolute difference between the nasal and temporal visual fields. So there is asymmetry, but it's not as strong as for the adult emmetropes. If we look at the change with accommodation, this fifth, we see here that the difference between the near and the far measurements was negative in the nasal visual field, both for 3 millimeter case and the natural case. So it became more negative in all groups, both for 3 millimeter natural pupil case. The temporal RPR instead became more positive, though it was more distinct than natural pupils. So even though not all of these cases separately were significant, we see that there's a clear trend that the nasal visual field becomes more negative, especially for skin pupils, and the temporal visual field becomes more positive, especially for nasal pupils and natural pupils. And if we want to visualize this, here we have the general emmetropes. We saw that temporal visual field was, the RPR was close to 0, but that's an image on the retina with a foveal being corrected. Nasal visual field had negative RPR, so that is an image in front of the retina whereas the myopes were close to zero for temporal vision field and a little bit positive for the nasal vision field, but no distinct asymmetry. And this was for far measurements, and if we then look at what happens with accommodation, we see that the asymmetry increases in overcrux, whereas for myopes, even though there is a slight shift, it does not answer to any asymmetry. So to summarize, we measured in total 50 subjects. We found that there was significant asymmetry in RPR between the nasal and temporal visual field in the emmetropes, adult emmetropes, and in the children, though this was less clear in the children. And myopes had no distinct asymmetry. And the nasal field got more negative RPR with accommodation, whereas oppositely, the temporal vision field got more positive hyperopic RPR with accommodation. So this increased the asymmetry that we saw in children and emmetropes. As for implications in terms of myopia regulation, I think we have many questions to ask. We have even more questions maybe than when we started. I think it's very interesting that the asymmetry of the children was, we had asymmetry, but it was less than the emmetropes and the myopes. So it would be really interesting to see what happens when these children grow older and how the asymmetry develops, whether they get myopic or emmetropic. So that was it for me. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jari. Are there any questions for her? No questions? Maybe a question from me. I know that you guys have been working on a longitudinal study. So you could try to see how that changes in children as they age. Is there already any kind of results from that, or still too early?
Yes, the children that were included in my presentation. They're part of our longitudinal study. And these data that I just from the first measurement or from the baseline. We have now completed the first follow-up measurements of the second time that they came to us after 1 year. I've not yet looked at that data regarding the asymmetry, so I unfortunately don't have any additional things to tell you about that.
Okay.
This is something we will look into now as we continue with the follow-up.
Okay, that's something to look forward to. Thank you very much, Chairman. Oh, sorry, there's one more question.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I just noticed that you actually showed us the relationship between the RP and the hyperope, emmetropes, and myopia. So I'm just interested, do you maybe consider the astigmatism, or you still about to consider that? Thank you.
Yes, so for RPR, we've only used the mean sphere when defining peripheral refraction and then relative refraction. So we have not looked further into whether large amounts of astigmatism or anything this is pure mean sphere. So just answer the question.
Yes.
Yes, it's one more.
Thank you for the presentation. It was lovely. I really enjoyed it. I just have a question. Maybe I missed it. I'm not quite sure. But I noticed that you were saying that when you were considering the myopes, did you maybe have a specific range of the myopes that maybe the maximum that you were allowing for the study? And also as well, I noticed that you said some of them were corrected. Yeah, did you maybe take into account that as well? Thank you.
We can go back to my first slide, or not first slide, but so for for the adults, we defined some refractive ranges where we for limiting our groups. So NFOs, we said we could have maximum half diopter, means we're full beyond refractive error. And if the minus wanted there to be at least minus a half. Or minus half diopters, usage diopters. We have as well astigmatism as well, so no more than 0.75, if I recall correctly. And for children, we wanted no more than, I think, minus 4.5 diopters maximum for the because we didn't want pathological kids.
Okay. Any last question? Okay, that's it for you then. Thank you very much, Charlie. And then we move to Norberto. Yes, hi Norberto. Maybe we're going to take a very short break, 5 minutes, because they just brought coffee and the delegates kind of need it. And then in 5 minutes, once everyone took their coffee, then we move to you. Okay?
Okay, no problem.
So as you heard, coffee time, 5 minutes, and then we move on.
Coffee.
Logistically, it's interesting. Logistically interesting. Because again, we may need to province. Yeah. Those are the other artists. Please come on. I know, hold on. I know you don't. We pay respect that comment. Just samosa or something.
Samosa is in triangle shape. So it's like cutlet.
Cut. Oh, it's.
You have different.
Yeah, cut. Of course.
Yeah, I think it came from Europe that we have it in India as well. So.
There's a large Indian community.
Oh, yeah, I've heard in South Africa.
Yeah. People that were dragged from there to work here. Not so much anymore, but back then, yes. At least you can.
Yeah, you could do it over 40 years. You did? Oh, I didn't know. Did you publish it?
Yeah, because even Norberto was here. Here he is, living on the street. Yeah. Yes.
That's, you know, I was wanting to put that in our talk. It said, we made all these rules. But we didn't, we, in the original paper, we wrote how to. But the anti-standards didn't.
All right, then.
His wife.
Amba, ini.
What are you having?
I don't know what the stainless steel is, but I'll link it actually. And I have it with this.
Yeah.
And I could
I'm glad I'm not the only one. Glad I'm not the only one.
Oh.
I was about to say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that had always remained with you. That had I noticed.
I wear this all day. No, man.
And I didn't.
Same for you? Without it, I get headaches.
So the thing is, in my
yeah, but it can lead something that can lead to
an odd.
No, I don't. But it would be very hearing about it.
It's kind of.
Yeah, yeah. It's like cultural thing.
That's interesting.
I've been to mountains. I've been to the thing. Pretty much. Headache kind of forcing things.
So that's how I plot when we went for lunch and figuring out which seat you are. You're tall and you have the hat, so it's
it helps. It helps.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you are, yeah, you are streaming live on YouTube at the moment.
Oh,
great. So you can watch afterwards. Everything. You don't need to take pictures. Perfect. Because it's very important. I love follow. Oh yeah, no. Or if you want to show students or anything. What is the link? Already, yeah. Okay. It's streaming live right now. If you want to watch it right now. Just now there was a slide that I wanted to see again. I just I just scrolled back. So it's not again. It works.
Eating soup.
Może wam jest sobie żyła pan na czasach, bo ja bym wszyscy słabe chłopak. No, dobrze. Więc chodziła w tym, żeby pokazać mi.
Almost at last people to come. We don't get the
Out of water.
Out of water.
Well, we boosted everything to the Okay, we're going to start again, this time with Norberto, who is going to talk about accommodative response to vanishing stimuli. So, Norberto, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I want to just to thank the organizer and to allow me to be with you at least in 2 dimensions. I would like to be in 3D. Okay, I remember I have fond memories of when I went to the Mopane meeting in 2003. It was spectacular. So I'm sorry to be there. Okay, so today I'm going to speak about the accommodative response to vanishing stimuli. These are new results has not been even sent for publication, so this is very new. Let's see, like here. Okay, yes. So, what is a vanishing optotype? Okay, it's also called the high pass spatial frequency optotype. Or how can we eliminate the low spatial frequency in a classical optotype? Well, it's quite easy. We can do the Fourier transform, and then the spectrum, we can filter the spectrum, just avoiding the lowest spatial frequency, and then come back to the spatial domain, use the inverse Fourier transform, and then this optotype has only high spatial frequencies. And this is nothing really new. In half century ago, already Börjeson, the Hobbit Conan, Börjeson, collaborators just designed this kind of optotype, or this made with spectral control, so these are typo. We see in detail what is this detail that this has white line in the center and 2 black lines around on a gray background. So in terms of grayscale, what we have like a tripod is the name of this kind of a control. And then what the defocus is doing is just taking the light in the center, the energy, and spread when it's out of focus, the split, and just fill these wells that are created by the 2 black lines. So the contrast is reduced, and then eventually it could disappear apparently for the standard digits out of focus. Okay. So there are a lot of investigations about this type of optotypes. One was made by Gabriel, but it's also Type was here involved, but there are many others. Okay, and normally they are using this kind of optotypes that are with tripods. I try to do an experiment with you. I don't know what is the distance, but you can see the group of tripoles, 3 tripoles that I put here in red, in blue, and the spatial frequency is increasing, and we go down. I don't know if you can see the smallest one with the highest spatial frequency in this area, okay? Because maybe it will be a little bit out of focus because of the chromatic aberration. You are a little bit myopic with the group, okay? If you still can see that, maybe if you are myopic, you can take out your glasses. Maybe you will see that this should disappear, okay? Or maybe if you are first myopic, just look for the bottom part of your glasses in order to do the effect of the defocus. Okay, maybe you will see the effect of that will disappear. Okay, so this stimuli has several clinical applications, and one that we have used is for the cell refraction. We are performing some apps in order to the people can do a cell refraction, and for that, it's simply just the subject to go to move away from the screen until he cannot see anymore the stimulus at all. Okay, it will disappear because the subject has been beyond his far point. Okay, or the stimulus is beyond his far point. But in that case, it's a very easy task for the surgeon to say, okay, now I cannot see. Okay, stop, and then we'll see we'll know what is the far point. It's much easier than just ask questions as in the clinical task. Okay, you need another person. You can do also by voice recognition, but sometimes not so easy. But what's interesting that we found some problems in a few young subjects that cannot see this vanishing stimulus, even when it is within the interval of clear vision. What is something strange, because sometimes we say, okay, the stimulus there, he cannot see it, but it was there, and then when they look something closer, the accommodation, because it will appear for them, and then look again to the screen and they disappear. So there was something already with accommodation that's not working well. Okay, it just was in a few subjects. So we were interested in what's happening here. We have one hypothesis in mind that the stimulus is in the interval of clear vision, but it's out of focus. Okay, then the accommodation system. And normally, when there's something out of focus, that will activate this ciliary muscle in order to put it in focus, to minimize the accommodation error. Okay? And then normally it's a negative feedback system, then the accommodative system. Okay? But what happens when the stimulus is out of focus, then it cannot be seen. So there is not an input to do the feedback. So then the accommodation will not start to work, and then this maybe what is happening. Okay, so in this case, we have this hypothesis that the accommodation mechanism do not work correctly. To some people, maybe because they accommodate too much of the rhythm vanishing all the time. Okay, and they are always out of focus, they cannot see them. And then the proposal of the study was to study the accommodation response of several people just using normal and vanishing octotype in order to see if the accommodation response is different or not. Okay, this has not been done so far as we know. So, and it was also interesting thing, we studied the stimulus without like just the tripods, main, but we also include dots with that will never disappear, will be out of focus but never disappear. So to see if this can help the study to accumulate a little bit more. So we use an barometer in order to measure the accommodation response. This case is the imaginary barometer. By the way, this barometer was presented for the first time in Mopane V in 2003 in South Africa. The good news this is a barometer that has an internal bowel system that can see the burdens of the stimulus for a very large range. So many people to accommodate, but it has a stimulus that is like a figure, and we have to modify the barometer in order to include a macro display that will show the vanishing oxides. And then we have to calibrate the macro display for the correct luminance, as a frequency that we use to 20 seconds per degree, and also color to show the correct color of the stimuli. And then we put the stimuli, we measure the mark point of the subject, clearly put the stimuli what the doctor beyond his far point and obtain his aberration, okay, and then move to the far point, and then move closer, half diopter, and so far and so on until 8 diopters. And then with these values of the aberrations, we obtain the accommodation response, okay, in 20 subjects with using several stimuli with repeated measurements 3 times. For this was the stimuli used was a typically polychromatic stimulus. In this case, was a balloon, okay, at the end of the road, and then the tripole in white tripole or gray, okay, the same tripole with dots, okay, and then the red tripole, the same with dots, and then blue tripole, and the same with dots, okay. And we will get for these 7 stimuli, we'll get the accommodation response. Here you have an example of the accommodation response in one subject. For the balloon, quite good response. We have some lead in the beginning and then some lag at the end. So typically, okay, response. We're using the tripole in white with dots. You will see the line with dots. Okay, the response was also very good. Having a lead in the beginning without dots was also quite good. A little bit less, lower, but was okay. With the red, something similar. Both response was similar. Okay, but in this case, for the blue, the response was worse for the stimulus without dots, okay, than with dots. Okay, in order to have the statistics of all the accommodation response, we obtain the amplitude of accommodation for every response, just taking the maximum minus the minimum value of the accommodation response. With this value, we make the statistic between inter-subject for the 3 measurements and inter-subject between subjects. Here we have the total the total results, okay, for the 7 stimuli in the average. This is the average of the accommodation response of the 20 subjects. Indeed, was 90 because one of them could not accommodate well. Right? So these are the standard deviation, which is quite large because the range of ages between subjects was ranged from 18 to 40. Okay, so they have different accommodation. But we can see here this is the bar for the white people, and this is the white people with dots, the red with dots, and the blue with dots, and the balloon. One of the things we can see here in a first glance is that the balloon has a higher amplitude accommodation, but significant higher than the rest of the stimuli. Okay. Also, we can see that using the dot, the amplitude accommodation increases. Okay. In the frequency of stimuli or vanishing oxide, but in the case in the red was significant difference. Okay. So that are mainly the main conclusion of the study that I'm going to just summarize here. We obtain better accommodation with polychromatic stimuli like the balloon with a more higher range of spatial frequencies. Also, using the dots that increase a little bit the quantum response in the array. Okay, and in general, we can see that the response do not seem to change its too much between the stimulus. Okay, even in the very first moment when the stimulus is far away, okay, has low divergence. So probably the hypothesis is not fulfilled. I mean that maybe it's not that the study cannot start to accommodate. Probably the system is just trying to change the accommodation in order to find the stimulus and then just follow it. Okay, so I want just to finally thank Castaño Marco, who is the student that finished his master, no master, background in optometry, do the research of course, the business team, and you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Norberto. Any questions for Norberto? Yes, Larry.
Norberto. Hi, Norberto. It's Larry speaking. Good to see you. I'm wondering if you've at all looked with binocular stimulation. I'm wondering about the influence of a convergence accommodation. As we know, some subjects don't respond well monocularly to an accommodative stimulus, and they depend upon that vergence accommodation to even begin to accommodate. And I wonder if that might help accommodate some of your interesting results for the blue light. It's a pretty intense stimulus, and maybe they need that extra vergence accommodation to accommodate accurately.
Yes, we did that monochronic, okay, because of course the anerometer just do it. We can maybe use also a mirror or something like that, you know, to do something more complicated. But the system was monocular. Probably regularly will help. Okay, always it will help the stimulus to focus to the stimulus. Okay, but there is also something interesting is that the stimulus is in a telephone. Okay, so one, but you know well what is the telephone. Okay, because you know what is more or less the distance, something like that. But yes, blue light, the telephone is a long distance, but the stimulus is inverted to a long distance. Okay, and could be 0.7 diopter in beyond. Okay, the telephone. That makes maybe can play a role. We don't know, but anyway, something that we have to investigate if the binocular vision could help. Okay.
Any more questions? Any more? Yeah, Tanya.
Hi, Norberto. That I think was this almost the last slide or one of the last slides. The amplitude of accommodation was best with the balloon. Now, clinically, should we be doing accommodative tests with a chromatic test target?
With a chromatic test targets.
No. We just use this balloon as a standard one. Okay. But not with the chromatic test. But of course, there are a lot of other studies made by Phil Kruger, okay, with chromatic and chromatic test. Okay. In this case, the type of
those are also a little bit chromatic because it's the channel of the blue channel, the red channel of the screen. Okay, that it's not very narrow. Okay, so it has some chromatic, but we cannot done that. What you asked for. Okay.
Hi, Norberto. Just a very short question. I'm Bruce. Yeah, nice to see you again. The reason for you to conduct this study is because you noticed there are some people who cannot see the vanishing other time. So my question is, how many percentage of the participants who cannot see the vanishing other times?
So in three subjects, mainly three subjects, that one of them was almost impossible. Okay, but this was when we analyzed that subject using this study, was the same accommodating with the government. I told you that 20 subjects and one of them could not be measured because the accommodation report was, and that was the subject that theory need just cannot see the stimulus when it was in his interval of clear vision. Okay. The other two subjects was also measured, but the other subject has not studied that problem. They can see it, but it was a little bit harder for them to see that in red more than in blue. Okay, but always having. So we decided to do this experiment, to do something else. Maybe there are no studies in accommodation response to vanity type. So I decided to see what something going. Okay, but it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Any last question? Okay, I would like to thank the online speakers, Norberto, Harris, and Charlie. Oh,
I want to just want to say one thing. Okay, it's I want just to tell you that maybe for you know the next VPO meeting will be in Spain. Catalina, I am the organizer. Okay, we have prepared a very nice. We are preparing a very nice meeting. Okay, so I would like to see you in Spain in Catalina. It's a very nice place. We want to do the meeting, so you can see here the window. You will see the sea. Okay, while during the meeting, Cartagena is a lovely place to full of history. Okay, to visit with the nice. Of course, you are very welcome. It will be between the 2 and 4th September of next year. Okay, that just you can put it in your agenda. Okay, that's
so to be clear, the venue will be the one on the left, not the one in the middle. Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Keeping up with the streak. Keeping up with the streak.
Well, hi. I want to thank the organizing committee for this lovely meeting, and I'm happy to be here. I am Alfonso Jaimes, or Alfonso James, whatever you prefer, and I'm with Tec de Monterrey in Mexico, and I'm also presenting ongoing work that I'm doing with my students at Tecnologico de Monterrey, and in collaboration with Barbara Bishonek. And well, I'm going to talk about a general adaptive aging model, the lens. And well, we know that the eye ages as us ages too. And the more pronounced changes occur in the lens. Presbyopia, cataracts, problems or issues that take place in the lens. And focusing on emmetropic eyes, the main changes in the lens is in shape and, of course, internal changes. One thing that is known for a little bit of time is that the lens grows with age. And of course, it has been measured that the anterior surface rate of curvature decreases. And that despite of this phenomena, the eye does not become myopic. So this has been called as the lens paradox. And also that is already known too, is that with age, spherical aberrations increase. And well, maybe one of the first answers or attempts to answer to lens paradox was to think that maybe the central refractive index is slowly going down. And there are studies that has found negligible changes. But of course, there are another studies that also found minimal changes, but some say that the lens power is affected, but a little less. But there are recent work like this in which they study the lens paradox, paying attention to the change in curvatures and also assuming a very slow but a decrease in the refractive index, or the central refractive index. And something that has been measured a lot of times in many studies is the gradual flattening of the green. Another way to explain the lens paradox. The green gets flatter with age, so the gaining in refractive power when the lens grows and increases its curvature is then balanced by the flattening. And here are some recent and not very, well, yeah, recent, but these more recent works. And this gradual flattening of the refractive index has been modeled, for instance, in this way. This is the axial, the sagittal refractive index. And here, this exponent P is the one that regulates the flattening of the refractive index distribution. And there have been a lot of models that address the aging process. For instance, the works of Navarro, which uses some kind of modified form of the original of Smith et al. And they use a particular parametrization of the exponent P in terms of A being age. So as the crystalline lens ages, then it becomes flatter. But this is not the only approach that has been used to describe aging. For instance, Navarro also and his colleagues have also worked in another model named the green model. And then they also use this coefficient, but with different distributions. And here we see the Diaz model of 2008, which is a single function model. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell that these models are green models, but the isoindicial curves are continuous, but they're not necessarily smooth. And in the case of Diaz model, they have a single function model, but age is aging is addressed by lowering the central refractive index, but with very strong changes, and optimizing parameters in order to model correctly the aging process with the biometric data. Another important model is avocado lens model, which not only uses this coefficient P, but uses another coefficient M, which is used in 3 different terms. This is it has 2 functions describing the refractive index, and they are not only continuous, but also they are smooth, have a smooth joint. So as you can see, there are a lot of approaches to model the aging of the crystalline lens. And there are also another interesting models that have not addressed aging yet. For instance, Lüneburg lens model. It's an interesting model which uses 2 functions. It is inspired in the free aberration Lüneburg lens. And the aging modeling is still lacking. And maybe one can be wondering, how can we induce these kind of changes in the Lüneburg lens? And also there is another lens model, the Poisson-Gauss lens model, which is constructed by simply multiplying a Poisson distribution, which is C to the M, E to the minus C, times a 2-dimensional Gaussian, and then you obtain a single function lens model, which is capable of discrete accommodation. And by the way, this model appeared in the Optics in 2020 special issue of Optics magazine, Optics and Photonics News. But also the aging modeling is still lacking. How can we address this process in general? Then we can ask if there is a general way to address this mechanism for any lens model. So it's kind of a model that uses models. Yeah, the model of aging in lens models. So we're going to take this hypothesis. First, let me take the growing of the lens as being scaling, differentiated scaling in the sagittal direction and the axial direction. We're going to get fixed the central and surface refractive indices. And the flattening will be induced or modeled by a general fine-tuning transformation that we have developed. And this model will be tested on 3 different lens models: Poisson-Gauss, Lüneburg, and avocado lens model. First of all, aging lens growth scaling. Well, here is an interesting work of 2021 in which the aging changes in the lens is studied. And they found statistically meaningful increasing in the lens diameter, also in the lens thickness. But the linear regression is not very reliable. One of the reasons, as you can clearly see, is that we have a bias. There are a few young eyes in the study. But again, let me take this linear regression that they show here, and then let me divide this, for instance, lens diameter and lens thicknesses by the lens diameter and lens thickness at age 25. We're going to model the aging of the crystalline lens from 25 years to 75. Therefore, here what we have are the scaling parameters, because when age is 25, here we have 1, but when age is greater than 25, we have greater than 1 numbers that are our parameter scaled. Those are the parameters of our scaling. So we have a different scaling in the z-axis, different scaling in the y-axis, and this, the z-axis or axial axis, is taken through the lens thickness, and this one from the lens diameter. With this, let me show you what happens to any radius of curvature. Well, to any axial radius of curvature, we have calculated that a function at the axial point, when it is scaled in z and y, the new radius of curvature is this one. Therefore, by taking the data of this paper, we have this change of curvatures of each of the initial curvatures of the lens. And then let me study what happened with the Poisson-Gauss model to the radius of curvature, lens equatorial diameter, lens volume, and lens thickness. So we have taken lens Poisson-Gauss model that can be considered as a 25 years old lens. And then with this scaling, we observe, of course, an increase in the lens thickness, increase in lens equatorial diameter, of course, in the volume, but this is important because here we have a more pronounced decay in the anterior radius of curvature compared to the posterior. But as it can be noted in this very recent Avaros paper, which uses Rosema's data about the perpetual eye model, in this data, we can see that not only the anterior, but the posterior radius of curvature decreases too. So here we have qualitatively acceptable biometric changes in the Poisson-Gauss lens only by taking this scale. Now, how do we are going to model this flattening? Well, we have developed a general mathematical transformation that has 2 parameters. One, which is h, which is a flattening parameter. Then when you vary this parameter, what you are inducing in this case, in this special case, is to induce like a kind of plateau with height h. And the other parameter, which is alpha, is a smoothness parameter. Here, alpha has this value. And when alpha goes, when alpha increases, this flattening is like a cut. It's very, very sharp. But if we take, if we decrease the value of alpha, then we can see that the flattening can be done in a more smooth way. And here we can see more smooth cuts. Of course, here we have a change in the maximum of the function, which is not what I'm doing, what we're doing in the lens model. But we can, with this transformation, we can simply fix the maximum and minimum of the function, and then we can have the same phenomenon, but without decreasing the value. So here we have, again, a large value of alpha, in which we can see here a very sharp flattening. But as we take another values, we can induce more smoothness variations. So this is a kind of fine-tuning, flattening functional transformation. And then by taking a look to the Poisson-Gauss distribution and entering only the flattening function, we can see something like this. And in this case, only in this case with the flattening of the green, the isoindicial curves do not change. They will change when we scale the model. And this is a general transformation that can be used to Poisson-Gauss, but with any other function. But how much flattening is required? Well, here you can see a color map, which is obtained by ray tracing with a code that we have developed at Tec de Monterrey with my students, undergrad students, and my master student. So it is a kind of white box which ray traces in MATLAB. And we are also working on publishing this code to be open source. And in this map color, we can see the focal distance, that is the paraxial focus of the eye. And not only the lens, we are considering a cornea, a schematic eye model. And then here we have age, but age is, remember, the scaling, because the scaling is a function of age according to this data. So here we have, broadly, in this axis, the scaling, which occurs at each age. And here we have the parameter age, which flattens the green. When age takes the value of 2, is almost like no flattening. And when we go from 2 to decreasing values, we are inducing the flattening to the green. So here we can see clearly that if we only scale and do not change the flattening of the function, of course, we go from, for instance, here, green to blue. Therefore, the focus decreases, which means that the refractive power of the eye increases too. Well, the focus decreases, the refractive power increases. But it's the flattening of the green which balances these changes, because here, if we do not scale the green, we are at a particular age, and we go from no flattening to more flattening, we're going from blue to yellow or green, so we're getting an increase in the paraxial focus. So that's why in this model, the lens paradox can be explained. Of course, this color map has been done for a particular smoothness parameter. Let me show you another smoothness parameters like this. Here we have the value, 0.4 and 0.6. 0.6, it's more aggressive flattening. So here we can see that with our flattening, we can get to more to greater values of the paraxial focus. So with a greater or more strong flattening, we can lose more refractive power. We're going to choose this one, 0.4, and then here we have what can be known or said as isofocal curves. That is, curves in which the focus is conserved. So this map tells us that, taking into account that scaling, if we take for each age these values of age of the flattening, we can go to an aged lens that whose paraxial focus do not changes. And the recent measurements about axial length actually say that there is a minimum but a little increase in axial length. But at the time, let me focus on an isofocal curve. That is, what we're doing here is to parameterize age to age. That is, this map gives us the flattening necessary to maintain constant the focus of the eye. With this ray tracing code, we have also calculated, well, Pablo Fernandez, which I'm going to present at the end of the presentation, has calculated also the spherical aberration coefficient of the spheric polynomials that not only Professor Larry Tybos and Professor Applegate have taught us yesterday. Here we can see also the spherical aberration coefficient. So here we can see if that the scaling do not change, if we have an age fixed and we induce the flattening, what we obtain is going from blue to yellow. That is, the aberrations increases. So maybe the aberrations are increasing because of the flattening of refractive index. So if we take the parameterization of the height age in terms of age, we will have this curve is in this space is a curve of the same focal of a constant focal paraxial focus, but in this space, which axis x and y are the same, the color here means aberration. So we go from a certain value of aberrations to another which is higher. And so we can keep the track of how the aberrations increases. We have taken the very interesting experimental results from the very paper that Professor Applegate showed us yesterday, in which he and his colleagues studied the evolution of the primary spherical aberration as function of age for different pupils. Here we have for the Poisson-Gauss, I'm sorry, I don't remember if I told you, but this again is the Poisson-Gauss lens model. And here we can see in red the experimental results. These bars are of standard deviation from the measurements of Applegate's paper. And here we can see the evolution of the aberrations for the 4 different pupil diameters. We think that it is important to study, to make a multi-pupil study, because maybe we can find very good results here, but here we can have very negative aberrations. Because here, if we want less aberrations or aberrations more close to this curve, then it can be easy if the lens gets more negative aberrations that will be seen here as negative aberrations. So here are our first results of our model, and we wanted to know if this model it is only appropriate to the Poisson-Gauss lens, or it can be taken as a more general model. And then we did the same. Sorry. This is for this value of alpha of the smoothening, and please take a look. If we change the smoothening, the aberrations change. It is not a dramatic change, but it is an important change. This is for alpha equal 0.2, which means smoother flattening, and with alpha equal 0.6 is a lot tougher flattening. So here we can see that this parameter really is making a fine-tuning of the aberrations and of the optical properties of the lens. We did the same on the Lüneburg lens. Here we have a curve of the parametrization of H in terms of H. And this curve is a curve in which the focal position is exactly the same as in the previous example. So here we have the corresponding change in aberrations. Of course, this is for a fixed pupil, but here we have the results for these 4 pupil diameters. And also make the same in the Börjeson model. We took a curve, is corresponding. Let me see. Yeah, I think that, yeah, I made a mistake. These curves are exactly the same. So it's my mistake, but these are different. So this corresponds to the avocado lens. So here we have these other results. Then what we conclude is that maybe roughly, but we can address the lens aging process by scaling and fine-tuning flattening of the green. Our approach can be applied to arbitrary green lens model. And of course, each model can adapt the geometrical changes to the fine-tuning flattening transformation. So another model can change its radius of curvature or lens thickness, lens diameter. But at the end, we think that this transformation, which makes basically this, can make the fine-tuning necessary to match the behavior of the spherical aberrations. Thanks to my collaborators, he's Pablo Fernandez. He was my undergrad student, and now he's my master's student. This work that I present to you is his master thesis project, and he's in the 4th semester, the last semester of his master's. Roberto and Ruben were undergrad students some semesters and years ago. And of course, my collaborator, Barbara Peschinek, which I'm thankful to for their collaboration. And well, thank you so much for your attention. You have any question? Yeah.
So if I understood right, and I'm not sure I did, you were determining some of your curves on the basis of keeping the ultimate focal length the same. Is that true?
Yeah.
But it's my understanding, unless my memory is failing here, and it may be, is that the eye becomes slightly more hyperopic as you age. My eye is certainly doing that. So I was wondering why you didn't put in that correction.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I forgot to mention this. This is a trajectory in which the partial focus is constant. Now, we can take another curve. We can take another curve which takes into account that hyperopic.
Why you didn't do that?
Oh yeah. We wanted to test our model in some first stage in which we could some kind of understand the behavior, what is happening. And when we understood this first stage, then we move to a more appropriate or more accurate picture. And thank you for the question, because I forgot to tell that this is promising, because if we permit the focus to increase, then what we observe in this map is that we will obtain lower increasing than the spherical aberration, which is nice, because in this first result, what we want is this lower increasing of the spherical aberrations. So by taking an appropriate curve, we hope that these results are even more accurate. But thank you very much for your question. I forgot to tell that.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I'm not sure if I missed this. I just wanted to know, how does the model predict changes in the lens power and also in refractive area with age? And also, what are the implications for the patient?
Thank you. Yeah, very good question. Here in these maps, we were not predicting the focal distance. We focus on fix a curve here, and then we predict spherical aberrations. Of course, we can do the opposite. We can find or look for a trajectory here, and then predict the decrease or increase in the paraxial focus. Or we can fix by another means the flattening with age by another means, and then take a look at what is happening either to the refractive error and to the spherical aberration. So those can be the ways in which we can make predictions. I don't know if I answered your question. Thank you.
I quite like the picture you had at the end, early, the ones with the mountains. You put that one up? Yeah. It really summarizes nicely your, the picture, the three-dimensional slides at the end. Yeah. Yeah, that one there, yeah. I mean, it really summarizes nicely the way you envision the change in this this profile, this surface. But I wonder, I wouldn't have guessed that, except for your initial part of your talk, I wouldn't have guessed that it ended up like that. See, the model on the right looks to me like a tabletop mountain in Cape Town. It's really flat on top. And then if you take a small, let me just put it this way. If you had a small tabletop mountain, and you're standing on the top, and you moved 1 meter to the right, you're quite close to the edge, and you're likely to fall off. But if you're on a really big tabletop mountain and you move 1 meter to the right, you're not very close to the edge, right? And they have this difference, apparent difference in flatness because of the way you measure the flatness. It's the gradient with respect to meters. And I just wonder if you shouldn't, or maybe you already have, take a different viewpoint and exclude an alternative hypothesis, which is that if you've been using normalized coordinates instead of physical coordinates to measure your gradient, you might find that the scaling model works pretty well. You know, instead of dividing, instead of the gradient per millimeter in the pupil, you divide those millimeters by the actual radius of the lens. And now it's a normalized parameter. Maybe it's not flattening at all. It's the same shape. It's just that you've made the lens bigger. So have you considered that hypothesis? You're shaking your head like, yes, yes. We've thought about that and we rejected that model.
Thank you. Yeah, well, this is only a visual representation. This is not the flattening that wasn't used. Well, I mean, this is great flattening. That's what not happens in our calculations. So this is only to, like you said at the beginning, is like a way to depict what is happening, but it is exaggerated. It is only for visual purposes. Well, that point. And yeah, let me explain, and you can tell me if I answer your question. When you, if one scale, yeah, like let's take this or this exaggerated mountain. But if we make the scaling of this distribution, of course, the plateau will be bigger, of course. So maybe that is the flattening of the lens, and we do not require any more flattening. At least here in these cases, what we see when we scale is that indeed the focal, the partial focus decreases, and then we require something else in order to respond, let's say, to the lens paradox. So this maybe is telling us that we must flatten even more to counteract those changes of the lens. And we wanted to know if it is how accurate are those results by taking a look at the spherical refraction. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Share about this again.
Yeah, of course. I will be very happy.
This kind of complicated issue, but
yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So now it's time for lunch. We postponed the talk by Ray and Larry on waveform aberrations to after lunch. I think we could all use it. We'll be back here at 2 o'clock.
How are you?